What up boys, and welcome to our third spell comparison video. Today I'm taking your guys' suggestion and comparing the Log and Barbarian Barrel. But before we do get into today's video, be sure to hit that subscribe button on my channel for more Clash Royale strategy content. Helps out my channel a bunch and can help out your Clash Royale game. Apart from that, let's get into this. Again, we're going to start off this comparison as all card comparisons should start with the usage and win rates of these cards. At the time of recording, Barb Barrel is up at 28% and has overtaken last week's Zap spell as the most used card in the entire game. Log is still pretty high, rocking a 23% use rate, so both cards average a place in every 4 decks. Barb Barrel is a little more popular right now, which becomes even more interesting when we look at the win rates of these cards. The Log is down at 46% win rate, which usually indicates that it's a more basic card to use. I would agree with this, especially seeing as its counterpart is the Barbarian Barrel. Barb Barrel's win rate is almost 10% higher than the Log's, absolutely killing it at 55%. In fact, Barb Barrel has the 11th highest win rate of any card right now. I guess it's actually a more highly skill capped card than I first imagined. It is the most used card in the game and 11th highest win card in the game, if that makes any sense. Despite these two feeling like very similar spells, there are actually a load more differences than you'd first imagine with these two. Firstly, their widths are 1.3 tiles apart. The Log spans over 3.9 tiles, whereas the Barbarian Barrel can only touch 2.6 tiles. Their damage stats have a difference of 40, which doesn't really sound like a lot initially. However, this difference actually means that the Log can finish off the likes of Dark Goblins and Princesses. Barb Barrel, on the other hand, needs to pop out and murder these troops. The biggest difference between these two cards is most definitely the range. The Log has the ability to travel all the way to your opponent's tower. This is super useful on offense, both for reaching units and for chip damage. But it's also good on defense too when you need to hit units on your tower and at the river. Barb Barrel has a stunted range that is 6 tiles shorter than the Log's. This really has no upside, and a lot of the time it's just annoying when you can't hit units. The biggest fact that I found about these spells is that Barbarian Barrel has a potential damage output that is 1/4 of what the Log has. Barb Barrel's damage output comes to 2,600, whereas the Log's is over 10,000, which does make you wonder, why on earth does Barb Barrel beat the Log on both win and usage rates? I would personally put this Barb Barrel dominance down to its effect. Spawning one entire Barbarian is a lot more useful than a knockback, right? Now don't get me wrong, the Log's knockback is super useful. As we discussed last week, it resets a unit's attack and makes it wind up all over again. Logging a Musketeer, that girl now has to reload her 1.1 second attack speed before she can dish out damage again. And of course, she also takes 240 damage to her face. However, that Barbarian can be used in so many ways. I did an entire video on this topic too, so if you want to check that out, it's in the top right now, and you can see all of the fancy tricks to do with Barbarian Barrel. Anyway, this cool little barb boy can actually be really useful in making up for the barrel's lack of damage. It can offer you a full counter to lots of ranged units in this game. Things like musketeers, wizards, and hunters can be fully taken out by a barb barrel, but not by a Log. On top of this, the barb barrel is also more useful when these units are being tanked for. The Barbarian is able to swoop around the back of these units and start dishing out extra damage to them. Although the barb barrel won't reach your opponent's tower, the barb itself offers an interesting offensive option for pushes. With the likes of Balloon and Graveyard, it can tank for these for just 2 elixir. It's not the greatest tank in the world, but it is very versatile as an option for this 2 elixir cost. Luckily, playing these two cards are fairly similar. They're both only playable on your side of the board until you take a tower down, so the only placement you really need to remember is at the river. Barbarian Barrel has a slight quirk due to its unit spawn, where you can kite other units to the center with the Barbarian, but otherwise you're more than likely just going to be using this card at the river to support your pushes, or on defense wherever you see fit. Log is exactly the same, and that's basically because these cards are spells. You just want to place them onto the board whenever you feel like you need a bit of instant damage, and there's no real difference between these two cards. One real difference that does exist between these two cards is the deck roles that they fill, and this hence changes which decks these two spells fit into. The Log enjoys more chip decks and commonly finds its place within win conditions like Expo, Hog Rider, and Log Bait. I guess this sort of makes sense as it is the most efficient small spell in terms of tower damage and offers these decks a reliable defensive option whilst also often hitting the tower for 84 damage a time. Barbarian Barrel pairs more with odd win conditions to me, things like Raw Hogs, Graveyard, and Balloon. Balloon. I guess these sort of make sense, as these are the premium punish archetypes that enjoy gaining elixir leads on defense from the Barbarian. In the cases of Graveyard and Balloon, the Barbarian Barrel also offers tank support, but in reality, I guess we have a similar story to the Zap and Snowball debate. Barbarian Barrel is a higher skill cap card, but Log will do its job more consistently for you. It really depends on your deck as to which one you use. The only difference here is that, in my opinion, Barbarian Barrel is objectively the stronger spell, despite not doing anywhere as near as much damage as its counterpart. With that being said, I still don't think any balance changes are entirely necessary to the situation of these two spells. Sure, it would be nice to see the Log get maybe a travel speed buff, but in all honesty, I think that these spells we've discussed in the last 3 videos are actually pretty well balanced. The only damage spells in the game right now that need work are Lightning, Rocket, Arrows, and Royal Delivery. The rest are actually pretty good and viable right now. It's also quite nice to have 2 options to every spell, and comparatively we sorta have a basic spell and a higher skill spell. The game just used to have the Log and Zap, but then Barbarian Barrel and Snowball came in and gave us new, higher skill options as the game's average skill cap increased. It's interesting to see how Supercell have done this, and for that reason I'd like to keep an eye out for the progress of Royal Delivery in it being Arrow's counterpart. Anyway boys, that's going to be all for today's comparison video. If you did enjoy this, then be sure to drop the channel subscription and let me know what you think of these 2 spells in the comments down below. But yeah, apart from that, thank you all for watching, and peace.